Good morning. So today's topic is actually in an advanced algebra topic or algebra 2. Um, it will help you do your IXL assignment, which is from algebra 2. It's called H3, which is the one that's about multiplying complex numbers. So, what is a complex number? First, we need to talk about the imaginary unit. Yes, there are imaginary numbers. Have you ever noticed if you had the square root of a negative and you tried to put it into the calculator, say it was the square root of -4, your calculator would tell you error, okay? It will say error, incorrect domain, something along those lines, but it will not do it. This is because the calculator can only handle real numbers, but we can deal with a square root of a negative by using imaginary numbers. So the imaginary unit, I, is equal to the square root of -1, okay? So when you have a negative inside of a square root, then you're dealing with an imaginary number. This is important to know that if I squared I, that means I would square the square root, right? And the square root would cancel. And so I squared is equal to -1. That's key. I squared is equal to -1. But I by itself is the square root of -1. And it is not a letter in math. It is a number. And it's called our imaginary unit. Our complex number is when I try to add an imaginary number to a real number. And so that will be in the form A plus BI. That's the standard form. The real part will come first and the imaginary part comes second, like this. The 5 plus 3i, this is a complex number. 5 is your real part, and then your 3i would be your imaginary part. All right? So that is what we need to know to get started. Adding and subtracting complex numbers is pretty simple. It would be like adding or subtracting if I had a variable. If I had a 5i plus a 7i, it's just going to be 12 i's, okay? The same way that we would do if we had x's, okay? The only difference is, again, when we multiply. I squared is equal to -1. So let's start with example A. I just want you to multiply and simplify. So 5i times -4, your real parts are going to multiply. 5 times -4 is -20, and then the I is just there. The I just stays. -20i. That's it. It's that simple. Okay, 8i times 9. Again, my real numbers are going to multiply. 8 times 9 is 72. And then I have my I. Okay, not so bad. 5 plus 3i times -2. So the 5 would multiply by the -2 and give me -10. And then the 3i would multiply by -2 and give me -6i. And again, that's it. I cannot combine these. These are not like terms. Okay, they would both have to have an I on the end in order to add them up or to subtract them. 5i times 3i. So the 3 times 5 gives me 15, but the I times the I gives me I squared. All right, now here's what I was talking about. I squared is equal to -1. I squared is -1. So what I'm really saying is this is 15 times -1, and 15 times -1 is -15. So that would be my final simplified answer. Whenever you see an I squared, you need to recognize that it is actually a -1. Okay, let's try one more in example A. -5i times 2 minus 2i. And I'm just going to distribute here. So the -5i times the 2 gives me -10 and the I. And the -5i times the -2i, the double negatives here, -5 times -2 is going to be a +10. And the I times I would be an I squared. All right? Again, we know that I squared is actually a -1, which means that this number is actually we have -10i plus 10 times -1. So the 10 times -1 is actually a -10. So I have -10i we'll just say minus 10 or plus negative 10 if you like. Minus 10 would be the simplified version. But I'm not done here because I need it to be in standard form. And in standard form, our complex number should always have the real number first, not the I. The I part has to come second. So what I need to do on this example is rearrange it. I'm not changing the signs. My negative 10 is still negative 10. And my negative 10i is still negative 10i, but it needs to come after the real part. So negative 10 minus 10i is your answer. You cannot answer in this form. Your I has to be second. It's been second the whole time. If there are two parts, your I is the second part. All right? So that is example A. A6 is a star for you to try.